Six blind elephants. Page 106. Logical levels. Summary of basic principles. From the foregoing discussion, we can summarize several important and interesting principles of logical levels. First, sensory-based experience. A sensory-based experience, before it is grouped and categorized, is simply a scope, which I have arbitrarily designated as logical level 0. Second, assigning logical levels. The term logical level only applies to a category of experience. A category whose members are sensory-based experiences is at logical level 1. A category whose members are logical level 1 categories is at logical level 2. A category whose members are logical level 2 categories is at level 3, etc. Number 3. Categorical inclusion. In order to say that two categories are at different logical levels, we have to show that the members of one category are included in the other. Number 4. Categorical inclusion is different from scope inclusion. In categorical inclusion, a sensory-based experience is included in a category of similar experiences. Categorical inclusion is different from scope inclusion. In categorical inclusion, a sensory-based experience is included in a category of similar experiences, or the members of one category of experience are included in another, more general category. In scope inclusion, described in Chapter 1, a scope of sensory-based experience is included in a larger scope of sensory-based experience, which may not be similar at all to smaller scope. Number 5. Logical levels are relative. The logical level we assign to a category is not a fixed thing that belongs to a category, but is relative, depending on how a particular person categorizes. The category keys would be at level 1 for someone who does not subdivide kisses into more specific categories, while for someone who does subdivide kisses into more specific categories, it would be at level 2, etc. Number 6. Levels of abstraction. The representation of a basic level category is a prototype example, which is always more abstract than the full range of examples in the category. More general categories become successively more abstract because they use prototypes of more specific categories as examples. The prototype of a more general category is an abstraction of abstractions. Each step of abstraction loses detailed information. Logical levels are number 7. Logical levels are intended for content. The term logical level refers to a relationship between a category and the sensory-based experiences. The term logical level refers to a relationship between a category and sensory-based experiences included in the category at logical level 1, or between a category and its subcategories at other levels, irrespective of the content examples that are included in the category. Since any content can be categorized in many different ways, depending on the number and kind of criteria that we select, as well as the sequence in which we apply these criteria, Assigning a fixed logical level to any content is not possible. Assigning fixed logical level to any content is not possible. Since any content can be categorized in many different ways, depending on the number and kind of criteria that we select, as well as the sequence in which we apply the criteria, assigned a fixed logical level to any content is not possible. Logical levels in mathematics. The logical levels described above result from what is called class inclusion. In mathematics, the basis for what is called naive set theory. This is what is used for the biological classification of all living things into categories of species, genus, family, etc. It is also the process that we all use intuitively for our everyday understanding and communication, and for the reasoning and conclusions of everyday logic. However, in the field of mathematics, the term logical levels is used for a somewhat different process, usually indicated by the word about. Unfortunately, this word has a bewildering variety of meanings in everyday language, and it is surprising to find such a vague word in a field that is generally very rigorous and precise. About can be used either as preposition, indicating several kinds of spatial relationships, or as an adverb. Modifying a process. About can mean around, circumference, near, or approximately, in either space or time, here and there, wandering, and even reversal, as in about face. If we examine these meanings, they all indicate different scopes of relationship between scopes. If we examine these meanings, they all indicate different scopes or relationships between scopes. This is most obvious in the meanings here and there, wandering or about face, which clearly indicates scopes in space, around, near, and circumference. All indicate a relationship in space, while approximately indicates an uncertainty in the scope of space or time. The meaning of about in mathematics refers to a description that is about something else, as in, I want to tell you something about Mary, and description of an event is said to be at a higher logical level than the event described. For instance, language is a way of describing events in the world of experience. So language is about events in the world, and is at higher logical level than the things and events it describes. In mathematics, this is an example of what is called object language, because the language is about actual objects or events. The objects or events are the content of the process of describing them with words. The objects or events are the content of the process of describing them with words. Okay. Any description of language is at higher logical level than the language described. The sentence, "language is a way to simplify and organize our experience," is a linguistic description of language, so it is about language. At a higher logical level than the language it describes. Linguistics is a language about language, a language that describes how ordinary language works. So mathematicians call it a meta-language. This usage of the term meta overlaps with the much looser and broader usage of this term in many psychological approaches, including NLP. All the more detailed descriptions of parts of speech, grammar, syntax, etc., in the field of linguistics are also descriptions of language. In a linguistic description, language has become the content, and linguistics has become the process. Like logical levels, what is content and what is process are function of the level of description what we attend to. Like logical levels, what is content and what is process are a function of the level of description that we attend to. Curiously, a description of language uses language to describe language. So it is both the content and the process of describing the content. For instance, any description of past parts of speech has to use parts of speech in the description. So it inevitably describes itself, what is called self-reference. This can result in some very interesting and something problematic. Communication, which we will explore in the chapter on self-reference and paradox in Volume 2. Metalinguistics, as used in mathematics, is defined as the study, description of meta-languages, yielding yet another logical level, languages about meta-languages. Now, linguistics has become the content rather than the process, and metalinguistics has become the process. Unfortunately, the standard dictionary definition provides a very different meaning for the word metalinguistics. The study of the relations between language and related phenomena such as thought, society, and culture. This usage still indicates the study of language, but within the broader scope of other aspects of culture. In this definition, it is not metalinguistics, in the mathematical sense of a meta-language, but simply linguistics that includes a much wider scope. Linguistics is expressed using words from natural language, as well as using new words that have been invented to refer to specific aspects or categories of words. Because of this, it is often difficult to determine in a specific instance whether language is being used to describe events or to describe descriptions of events, or even descriptions of events. This is the basis for Gregory Bateson's Dizzying example from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, written by Lewis Carroll, who was a professional mathematician and logician. The name of the song is called Haddock Eyes. "Oh, that's the name of the song, is it?" Alice said, trying to feel interested. "No, you don't understand," the knight said, looking a little vexed. "That's what the name is called. The name really is The Aged Man." "Then I ought to have said that's what the song is called," Alice corrected herself. "No, you oughtn't, that's quite another thing. The song is called Ways and Means, but that's only what it's called, you know. Well, what is the song then? Said Alice, who was by this time completely bewildered. I was coming to that, the knight said. The song really is a sitting on a gate, and the tune's my own invention. One more time. The name of the song is called Haddock's Eyes. Oh, that's the name of the song, is it? Alice said, trying to feel interested. No, you don't understand, the knight said, looking a little vexed. That's what the name is called. The name really is the aged man. Then you ought to have said then I ought to have said that's what the song is called. Alice corrected herself. That's what the song is called. No, you oughtn't. That's quite another thing. The song is called Ways and Means. But that's only what it's called, you know. Well, that is not the song then. Well, what is the song then? Said Alice, who was by this time completely bewildered. I am bewildered as well. I have no idea what they're talking about. I was coming to that, the knight said. The song really is a sitting on a gate, and the tune's my own invention. I have no idea what they are talking about. In case you find this exchange a bit puzzling, as Alice did, you need to make a distinction between a thing or event, how it is categorized, what it is named, and what a thing or name is called. How it is categorized. How it is categorized. For instance, let's take a parallel example of the song named Amazing Grace. We can distinguish a particular scope of words and sounds. These words and sounds can be categorized as a song. The particular song is named Amazing Grace. This song is called a hymn, a category of song. The name of the song is called a title. The name of the song is called a title, a category of name, I see. Part of the difficulty understanding the knight is that a sitting on a gate, the aged man, Ways and Means, and Haddock's Eyes all sound like names or titles, and they also look like titles with their quotes and capital letters, so we automatically categorize them as that way. Yet only one is actually used as a name. The aged man is the name of the song. Ways and Means is what the song is called. And Haddock's Eyes is what the name of the song is called. What something is called is a categorization, not a name. Finally, a sitting on a gate is neither a name nor a category, but are the actual words of the song. Another part of our difficulty understanding this is the common confusion between the name of a category, which is only a label for the category, and the category itself, or a member of the category. The word song is a name of a category of sounds and words. However, a name, like anything else, can also be categorized. To summarize, in parallel with the example of Amazing Grace given earlier, the words of Knight's song are as sitting on a gate. The words can be categorized as a song. The name of this song is The Aged Man. That song is called, categorized, Ways and Means. The name of the song is called, categorized, Head Exercise. The sounds of the words are what we have been calling sensory-based experience. We first categorize these sounds as words, logical level 1. Then we categorize this set of words as song, level 2. Then this song is both named and categorized as a member of a group of such songs, level 3. This may seem like a totally irrelevant example of logical levels. However, the confusion of levels of naming and categorization that it exemplifies is precisely the kind of confusion that we find in many problems that people have in everyday conversation. For instance, when someone responds to what someone said with amazement and says, "I don't believe it," is their response to the content of what someone said, or to the fact that they said it? Question mark. For instance, when someone responds to what someone said with amazement and says, "I don't believe it," is their response to the content of what someone said, or to the fact that they said it? If someone says, "I want to ask you if you would be willing to take out the garbage," and someone else replies, "Okay," are they saying okay to making the statement or to taking out the garbage? How can we fit these different descriptions into our fundamental distinction between scope and category? How can we fit these different descriptions into our fundamental distinction between scope and category? When we talk about events using language, we inevitably categorize them, since language is almost entirely composed of words that refer to categories. Accordingly, any description will be a categorization, and any categorization is also a description. A description can be used either to categorize something or to describe a scope of experience. For instance, the sentence, "Wombats are marsupials," a group of warm-blooded vertebrates, categorizes a group of animals successively as marsupials, warm-blooded, and vertebrates. However, the sentence, "Wombats live in Australia and eat eucalyptus leaves," expands the scope of our experience of wombats to include where they live and what they eat. Australia is clearly a scope of space, and although eucalyptus leaves is a category, it indicates a scope of space beyond wombats. If we combine those two sentences with "and", the resultant sentence would provide both a categorization and an expansion of scope. It is often very difficult to tease apart whether a particular set of words describes a certain scope of category or both, and we will devote the next chapter to making this distinction clearer. The descriptions of language by linguistics include subcategories such as parts of speech, articles, nouns, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, etc., as well as rules for sequencing and modifying words contextually, syntax, grammar, declension, etc. Within linguistics, these categories that are used to describe language will be at different levels of categorization based on categorical inclusion. For instance, parts of speech is a more general category than nouns, verbs, articles, etc., and different grammatical and syntactical rules will also occur at different levels of categorization. This can be represented by a tree structure, like the one we used for the children's blocks at the beginning of this chapter. From all this, it appears that the logical levels of mathematics embrace a wide range of both scope and category in a rather broad way, emphasizing the important and useful distinction between describing objects and describing the descriptions of objects, etc. Using the distinctions of scope and category, we can take any such description and determine the scope of scopes, the categories, subcategories, etc. Then, using the principle of categorical inclusion, we can assign logical levels. Logical type. This term was introduced nearly 100 years ago by Bernard Rasher in connection with his concern with paradox, which threatened the consistency of logic. Logical type has been extensively used by George Bateson, Bradford Canny, and others to describe language and communication and their application to human problems and difficulties. In an effort to identify and avoid paradox, if you maintain a clear distinction between scope and category while reading their works, you will find that they use the term logical level and logical type interchangeably. In addition, they use both these terms for both scope and category. They don't distinguish between scope inclusion, including one scope of sensory-based experience inside a larger scope, and class inclusion, which I have called categorical inclusion, including the members of one category in a more general category. This confusion has been continued by students of Bateson, notably Michael Hall, logical levels, and Robert Dilts, logical levels, neurological levels, and logical types. I have repeatedly asked both Hall and Dilts about the basis for their logical levels, and both have stated empathetically that they do not use the principle of class inclusion, which I have been calling categorical inclusion. However, they also did not provide an operational definition for distinguishing logical levels. For instance, Dilts writes, quoting Batson, "The central thesis of the theory of logical types is that there is a discontinuity between a class and its members. The class cannot be a member of itself, nor can a member be the class. Since the term used for the class is of different level of abstraction, a different logical type from terms used for its members." In the 1980s, I adopted the ideas of Russell and Peterson to formulate the notion of logical levels and neurological levels in human behavior and change. Drawing from Peterson, the levels model proposes that there is a natural hierarchy of levels within an individual or group that function as different logical types of process. Group. Since Russell's theory of types is based on class inclusion, this is a clear statement that class inclusion is the basis for both Dilts' logical levels and neurological levels, despite his puzzling insistence that it is not. Since Russell's theory of types is based on class inclusion, this is a clear statement that class inclusion is the basis for Dilts' logical levels and neurological levels, despite this dispute his puzzling insistence that it is not. Dilts' neurological levels hierarchy is as follows: spiritual, identity, beliefs and values, capabilities, behaviors, environment. I want to begin by saying that this can be a very useful schema to focus our attention while gathering information. Sometimes a client has a problem that is mostly environmental. I live in a red hole. Sometimes they need to learn a particular behavior, spelling or small talk. Sometimes they may doubt their capability, learning or intelligence. Learning or intelligence. No, okay. Others may be confused about their beliefs or values. I don't know what to think. May suffer from an identity crisis. I don't know who I am. Or may